Hello, welcome to the second of 3 videos on financial market benchmarks. In the first video, we outlined the work to select risk-free rates as an alternative to certain interbank benchmarks or IBORs in the future. In this video, we're going to focus on a separate stream of work to identify robust fallbacks to key IBOR contracts. Again, I'm joined by ISDA's General Counsel, Katherine Darras. Katherine, let's look at this from the perspective of scope, first of all. What does this work actually cover? And importantly, how does it differ from the selection of the alternative risk-free rates that we discussed in the first video?
As we discussed, there's several public-private sector working groups looking at selecting risk-free rates that could be used as an alternative to certain select IBORs and encouraging use of those rates in the future. However, we know that there will continue to be a volume of legacy trades and a segment of future trades that will continue to reference IBORs. The question is, what happens if an IBOR is permanently discontinued and no price is available? Which methodology should be used to determine prices for outstanding IBOR contracts? So derivatives documentation, ISDA documentation, currently sets out a methodology where counterparty pairs utilize a set of reference banks in a polling process to select an alternative rate. Following a request by the FSB, a work stream led by ISDA has been established to identify more robust fallbacks that could provide more certainty for counterparties that have referenced those IBOR rates in their contracts in the unlikely event that that IBOR rate is permanently discontinued.
And what progress has been made?
So the working groups are currently focused on USD, sterling, and yen. We're monitoring the situation related to euro and Swiss franc to determine whether or not it's appropriate to extend the group effort to that. And we've recently extended the work scope to include Australian, Hong Kong, and Singapore dollar rates. So the group has made good progress. They've decided for those 3 currency, the USD, sterling, and yen, that the risk-free rates selected by the relevant public sector working group of fallbacks would be the logical fallbacks for the IBORs also. The working groups are looking at ways to address and minimize valuation impacts associated with using with a term IBOR contract falling back to an overnight rate. And the current proposal is to apply a spread to the fallback in that situation. We would need to make a change to ISDA documentation to reflect this, and we will use our usual documentation process to consult with the industry on those proposed changes.
So does this initiative cover, or will it cover, legacy transactions?
So unlike the transition to risk-free rates that we discussed earlier, the scope of that is currently anticipated to focus on new contracts only, we think there's a logic to applying the robust fallback for all key IBOR contracts, both new and legacy. So that's because in the unlikely event that an IBOR rate is permanently discontinued, it makes sense for everyone to be using the same successor published fallback rate. So certainty regarding which rate to use in that scenario would apply equally to legacy as well as new contracts. So if that is indeed the case, ISDA could publish a protocol to help firms alter their legacy contracts to incorporate those fallbacks in an efficient way. This would only work, I think, if the entire market amended their legacy contracts. Otherwise, firms would face significant basis risk. And as all ISDA protocols are voluntary, there would likely need to be some kind of regulatory action to ensure that everyone makes the change.
So what's the timeline for getting this done?
There's still some outstanding issues to be resolved. For instance, whether or not this regulatory action is necessary. So as a result, we haven't set a firm timeline. We'll absolutely make an announcement once a preliminary decision of the group has been reached, and the ISDA changes to ISDA documentation will run through the typical documentation consultation period where we will go out to the market and have a series of calls and in-depth webinars on the changes needed to incorporate the new rates.
Okay, so watch this space. Having focused on risk-free rates and fallbacks in the first two videos, we're going to change tack and look at the forthcoming EU benchmarks regulation in the third video.